They say blood is thicker than water, but what happens when that blood runs cold with hatred? When the people who share your DNA would rather see you destroyed than acknowledge you exist. My name is Tasha Williams, and this is the story of how I fought an entire family, a wealthy, powerful, racist family, to claim what was rightfully mine. A story of betrayal, secrets, and inheritance that nearly cost me everything, including my life. But before I tell you how I almost lost it all, let me take you back to where this nightmare began. And, trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Hey, beautiful people. Before we dive into this wild ride, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because the story I'm about to tell you has more twists than a roller coaster, and you don't want to miss a single detail. Trust me, you'll thank me later. Now, let's get into it. Let me paint you a picture of who I was before my world turned upside down. Picture this, a 28-year-old black woman, standing 5'6", with natural hair that defied gravity and a smile that could light up the darkest room. That was me, Tasha Williams. I spent my days as a community organizer in Oakland, fighting for affordable housing, better schools, and basically trying to make life better for people who looked like me. I lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment, drove a reliable but aging Honda Civic, and my biggest luxury was my weekly coffee from the local Black-owned cafe. But here's where my story gets interesting, and trust me, it gets very interesting. I had a secret. A secret that even I didn't fully understand until it was too late. You see, my father wasn't the man who raised me. My real father was a man named Richard Pemberton, a wealthy white businessman worth over $50 million. Now, I know what you're thinking. Tasha, how did you not know this? Well, let me explain. My mother, God rest her soul, had an affair with Richard when she was working as his assistant 29 years ago. When she found out she was pregnant with me, Richard made her a deal. He would support us financially, quietly, secretly, but he could never publicly acknowledge me as his daughter. His reputation, his marriage, his business, everything depended on keeping me a secret. So every month, like clockwork, an envelope would arrive with cash. No return address. No note. Just money that helped my mother raise me, put me through college, and start my career. I always wondered where it came from, but my mother took that secret to her grave. Richard would see me occasionally, always in secret, always brief. He'd show up at my college graduation, hiding in the back. He'd send anonymous flowers on my birthday. He was like a ghost in my life. Present, but never really there. But here's the thing about secrets. They have a funny way of coming to light at the worst possible moments. It was a Tuesday morning in March when my phone rang with news that would change everything. Richard Pemberton was dead. Heart attack at 62. Sudden. Unexpected. Gone. I felt empty. How do you mourn a father you never really knew? How do you grieve for someone who is both everything and nothing to you? But then came the call that sent my world spinning off its axis. Miss Williams? This is Patricia Caldwell from Caldwell, Martinez and Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of Richard Pemberton. You've been named in his will, and your presence is required at the reading this Friday at 2 p.m. I literally dropped my phone. Me? Named in his will? After 28 years of being a secret, Richard had finally acknowledged me, posthumously. Friday couldn't come fast enough, but when it did, I almost chickened out. I stood outside that marble-columned law office building for 15 minutes, my hands shaking as I clutched my purse. I was wearing my best black dress, the one I'd bought for job interviews, and I felt so out of place in that world of old money and inherited privilege. But I walked in anyway, and that's when I met them. The Pemberton family. First, there was Eleanor Pemberton, Richard's widow. Picture this. A woman in her late 50s with silver hair pulled back so tight it could have been a facelift, wearing pearls that probably cost more than my yearly salary. The moment I walked into that conference room, her icy blue eyes locked onto me with a hatred so pure, so visceral, that I actually took a step back. Then there were Richard's children, my half-siblings, though they would have rather died than acknowledged that connection. Chad Pemberton, 31 years old, was everything you'd expect from a privileged white boy who'd never been told no in his life. Tall, blonde, with the kind of arrogance that money can buy. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my rent, and he looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. And Lisa Pemberton Hamilton, 29, just a year older than me. Blonde like her brother, with the kind of plastic surgery that screams, "I peaked in high school, and I'm desperately trying to hold on to it." She had her mother's cold eyes and her father's cruel mouth. The moment I sat down at that mahogany conference table, the temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. The lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, cleared his throat and began reading. Most of it was what you'd expect. Eleanor got the house. Various investments were divided between Chad and Lisa. Charities received their donations. And then, to Tasha Williams, my daughter. The silence in that room was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop. Eleanor's face went white, then red, then a shade of purple I didn't know humans could achieve. "Daughter," she shrieked, her voice cracking like a whip. "What daughter?" Richard didn't have any other children. But Mr. Caldwell continued, his voice steady and professional. "To Tasha Williams, my daughter, I leave the sum of $12 million, as well as my 40% share in Pemberton Industries, to be held in trust until her 30th birthday. $12 million. And a controlling share in a company worth hundreds of millions." I'm pretty sure I stopped breathing for a full minute. But then Mr. Caldwell kept reading, and this is where things got really interesting. "However, this inheritance is contingent upon the beneficiary maintaining moral character and conduct befitting the Pemberton name. Should any evidence of criminal activity, moral turpitude, or behavior deemed inappropriate by the estate trustees be discovered, this inheritance shall be forfeit and distributed among the remaining heirs." Chad's face lit up like Christmas morning. Lisa actually smiled, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her. And Eleanor. Eleanor looked like a predator who'd just spotted wounded prey. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The meeting ended in chaos. Eleanor was demanding DNA tests, Chad was shouting about contesting the will, and Lisa was already on her phone, probably calling every private investigator in the city. But as I walked out of that office, clutching the papers that proved I was now worth millions, I heard Chad's voice behind me, cold and clear. "She won't see a penny. We'll make sure of that." And that, my friends, is when I realized I wasn't just inheriting money. I was inheriting a war. The first week after the will reading, I tried to pretend everything was normal. I went to work, I organized community meetings, I even went on a date with this guy Marcus who'd been asking me out for months. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. And I was right. It started small. My coworkers mentioned that people had been asking questions about me. My landlord casually brought up that some nice young man had been inquiring about my rental history. The barista at my coffee shop mentioned that a woman had been asking about my regular order, my schedule, my habits. They were building a case against me, and they weren't being subtle about it. But here's what Chad and Lisa didn't know about me. I didn't survive growing up in Oakland and working in community organizing without learning how to spot trouble. And honey, trouble was coming for me with a capital T. My best friend Maya, who also happens to be a brilliant lawyer, called me on a Thursday evening, and her voice was tight with concern. "Tasha, we need to talk." Now, 20 minutes later, we were sitting in her kitchen, and Maya was spreading documents across her dining table like she was preparing for war. "They've hired Blackstone Investigations," she said, her voice grim. "These people don't mess around. They've been digging into your entire life, your finances, your relationships, your work history, even your college years." I felt my stomach drop. What are they looking for? Anything. Everything. Drug use, financial impropriety, questionable relationships. They're looking for any excuse to trigger that morality clause. That's when it hit me. The anonymous messages on social media. The hang-up calls. The feeling of being followed when I walked home at night. They weren't just investigating me. They were trying to intimidate me. But Maya had more bad news. There's something else, Tasha. Something you need to know about your father's death. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? The heart attack, it wasn't natural. Richard was poisoned. The room started spinning. Poisoned? By who? The police don't know yet. The investigation is ongoing. But Tasha. Maya grabbed my hands, her eyes intense. If they're willing to kill Richard to prevent him from acknowledging you publicly, what do you think they'll do to you? That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every shadow outside my apartment window looked like a threat. Every sound in the hallway made my heart race. I was trapped in a nightmare and I didn't know how to wake up. But then I remembered something my mother used to tell me. Baby, when life tries to knock you down, you don't just get back up, you get back up swinging. The next morning, I called in sick to work and went to Richard's house. Eleanor was at some charity luncheon, and the staff was minimal on weekdays. I still had the key Richard had given me years ago for emergencies, a key I'd never used, but always carried. Walking through that mansion felt surreal. Every room screamed wealth and privilege. The kind of life I could have had if Richard had been brave enough to claim me publicly. But I wasn't there for a pity party. I was there for answers. I found them in Richard's study. Hidden behind a false back in his desk drawer, I discovered a metal box. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me but never sent. Letters describing his regret, his love, his plans to finally acknowledge me publicly after Eleanor's death. Letters explaining why he'd been supporting me in secret all these years. But the last letter changed everything. My dearest Tasha, it read, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and my cowardice has finally caught up with me. I need you to know the truth about your inheritance. It's not just money, it's justice. Chad and Lisa don't know this, but the company they think they're inheriting is built on a lie. Their mother embezzled millions from the business over the years, and I've been covering it up to protect the family name. The evidence is in safe deposit box 1247 at First National Bank. Use it wisely. Use it to protect yourself. I'm sorry I couldn't be the father you deserved, but I pray this gift will give you the power to be everything I was too afraid to let you be. All my love, Dad. Dad. He called himself Dad. For the first time in 28 years, I had a father who claimed me. But I also had something else now. I had ammunition. And I was about to learn just how dangerous a cornered animal can be. That weekend, Maya and I hatched our plan. If Chad and Lisa wanted to play dirty, we'd show them just how dirty things could get. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. Maya had connections in the private investigation world. The kind of people who could find out what someone had for breakfast 3 weeks ago. Within 48 hours, we had a complete dossier on the Pemberton family. And honey, these people had more skeletons in their closets than a Halloween store. Chad Pemberton, Golden Boy heir apparent, had a gambling addiction that had cost him over $2 million in the past 5 years. He'd been borrowing against his trust fund, forging documents, and even stealing from company accounts to cover his debts. Lisa Pemberton Hamilton, perfect suburban wife and mother, was having an affair with her personal trainer while her husband traveled for business. But here's the kicker. She was also embezzling money from the children's charity she ran, using it to fund her lifestyle and pay for her boyfriend's gym. And Eleanor. Eleanor was the master manipulator behind it all. She'd been systematically poisoning Richard for months with small doses of digitalis, making it look like heart problems. The plan was to kill him slowly, inherit everything, and then eliminate any evidence of her crimes. But Richard's sudden decision to acknowledge me in his will had accelerated her timeline. She'd given him a fatal dose the night before he was supposed to meet with his lawyer to discuss changing his will even further. Eleanor Pemberton was a murderer. Now I had a choice. I could take this evidence to the police and watch the whole family burn. Or I could use it strategically to protect myself and claim what was rightfully mine. I chose strategy. Maya and I started our campaign of psychological warfare on a Tuesday. We began with Chad. I had Maya's investigator friend leave gambling debt statements in Chad's car. Anonymous tips to his AA sponsor about his relapse. Photos of him leaving the casino at 3 a.m. sent to his girlfriend. Within a week, Chad was a paranoid mess. He was convinced someone was following him, documenting his every move. He started seeing threats everywhere. But the beautiful part? He thought it was standard private investigator work. He had no idea I was behind it. Meanwhile, Lisa was getting her own special treatment. Anonymous letters to her husband about her affair. Photos of her with Marcus the trainer sent to her country club friends. Financial discrepancies in her charities, books mysteriously flagged by the IRS. Lisa went from perfectly composed socialite to frantic, desperate woman in 10 days. They started calling me. Chad first, his voice slurred with alcohol. I know you're behind this, you little. I cut him off, my voice sweet as honey. Behind what, brother? I'm just trying to understand why Daddy left me so much money. Maybe he saw something in me that he didn't see in you. Lisa's call came at 2 a.m., her voice shaking. What do you want? Money? I'll pay you to disappear. Disappear? I laughed. Honey, I'm just getting started. But Eleanor was smart. She knew exactly what I was doing, and she was preparing her own counterstrike. The anonymous messages started arriving on a Thursday. Text messages from burner phones. Emails from fake accounts. All with the same message. We know what you did in college. Stop now or everyone will know. My heart stopped. College. They'd found something from college. See, when I was 19, stupid, and desperately trying to fit in at UC Berkeley, I'd made some questionable choices. There was this party, this guy, this situation that got way out of hand. Someone got hurt. Bad. And I made a decision that I'd regretted every day since. I'd never told anyone about that night. Not Maya, not my mother, not anyone. It was buried so deep I'd almost convinced myself it never happened. But Eleanor had found it. Somehow, she'd uncovered the one secret that could destroy me. The messages became more specific. Vehicle registration 4C7X9. November 15th, 2015. Berkeley Memorial Hospital. Ring any bells? I was trapped. If that information came out, I wouldn't just lose my inheritance. I could go to prison. Eleanor had me exactly where she wanted me. But here's something Eleanor didn't know about me. I don't go down without a fight. And I was about to remind her why you should never corner a woman with nothing left to lose. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at those threatening messages, and I had what I can only describe as a moment of clarity. Eleanor thought she had me beat because she'd found my one secret. But what she didn't realize was that I now knew all of hers. And murder trumps everything. I called Maya at midnight. Emergency meeting. Now. An hour later, we were back at her kitchen table, but this time, I was the one spreading out documents. Maya, what's the statute of limitations on manslaughter? She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. In California? 3 years for most cases, but there are exceptions. Tasha, what are you talking about? I took a deep breath and told her everything. The night at Berkeley, the accident, the cover-up, all of it. Maya listened without judgment, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Tasha, even if they exposed this, you were 19. You were scared. Any decent lawyer could argue self-defense, maybe even get the charges reduced or dismissed entirely. But Eleanor, she gestured to the evidence we'd gathered about Richard's murder. Eleanor is looking at life in prison. First-degree murder. Premeditation. Poison. This isn't a college kid making a mistake. This is a calculated killer. That's when our real plan began to take shape. We weren't going to react to Eleanor's threats. We were going to get ahead of them. The next morning, I did something that scared me more than anything I'd ever done in my life. I walked into the Oakland Police Department and requested to speak with a detective about a cold case from 2015. Detective Rodriguez was a woman about my mother's age, with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who'd heard every story twice. I told her everything about that night in Berkeley. Every detail I'd been hiding for 8 years. She listened, took notes, and at the end, she surprised me. "Miss Williams, based on what you've told me, you were defending yourself against sexual assault. Even if the district attorney wanted to pursue charges, which they wouldn't after all this time, you'd likely be protected under California's self-defense laws. For 8 years, I'd been carrying guilt and shame for protecting myself. 8 years of nightmares and fear, all for nothing. But more importantly, I was no longer vulnerable to Eleanor's blackmail. It was time to go on the offensive. That afternoon, I made 3 phone calls. First, to Chad. "Hey, big brother. Meet me at the Fairmont Hotel bar tonight at 8. We need to discuss our father's estate." Second, to Lisa. "Sister dear, drinks at the Fairmont at 8. Time to have a family chat." Third, to Eleanor. "Mrs. Pemberton, I believe you and I need to have a conversation. Tonight, 8 p.m. The Fairmont Hotel." I arrived at the Fairmont at 7:30, wearing a black dress that said business but whispered trouble. I'd chosen the bar specifically, public enough to be safe, private enough for real conversation. They arrived separately, each looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Chad was drunk already, Lisa was popping what I assumed were anxiety pills, and Eleanor looked like a queen preparing for war. Well, Eleanor said as she approached our table, her voice dripping with disdain. "The little pretender wants to play with the big boys." I smiled, gesturing to the empty chairs. "Please sit. We have so much to discuss." Chad slumped into his chair, glaring at me with bloodshot eyes. "What do you want, Tasha? Money to go away? Name your price." "Oh, Chad," I laughed, pulling out my phone. "I don't want your money. I want justice." I played the recording I'd made at the police station that morning, Detective Rodriguez confirming that I was not going to be charged with any crime related to the 2015 incident. Eleanor's face went white. Her trump card was gone. "But since we're talking about crimes," I continued, "let's discuss some recent ones, shall we?" I placed a folder on the table. Inside were bank statements, photographs, medical records, and a detailed timeline of Richard's poisoning. "Eleanor, did you know that digitalis shows up in hair follicle tests for up to 90 days after death? The coroner is reopening Richard's case based on some anonymous tips they received." Eleanor's hands began to shake. "Chad, those gambling debts you've been hiding? The IRS is very interested in where you got the money to pay them off. Embezzlement from a family business is a federal crime." Chad's face turned green. "And Lisa, sweetheart, misappropriation of charitable funds is not just a crime. It's a crime that destroys reputations forever." Lisa started crying. "Now," I said, leaning back in my chair, "here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop trying to frame me. You're going to stop investigating me. You're going to accept that I am Richard's daughter and I deserve everything he left me. And if we refuse?" Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. I smiled, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly powerful. "Then I release everything I know to the press, the police, and the IRS. And we'll see which one of us the public sympathizes with, the secret daughter fighting for her inheritance, or the racist family who murdered their patriarch." Eleanor stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the calculations running behind her eyes. She was trapped, and she knew it. But Eleanor didn't become a wealthy widow by giving up easily. "You have no idea who you're messing with," she hissed, standing up from the table. "This isn't over." As she walked away, I called after her, "Oh, Eleanor? The coroner releases his preliminary findings tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'd make sure you have a good lawyer by then." That night, I thought I'd won. I had no idea that Eleanor was about to make one final, desperate play that would put my life in immediate danger. I should have known that cornering Eleanor Pemberton would be like poking a rattlesnake with a stick. You might think you have the upper hand, but that snake still has fangs. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Maya and a voicemail that made my blood run cold. Tasha, don't go home. Don't go to work. Don't go anywhere you normally go. Eleanor has hired professional muscle, and they're not just looking to intimidate you. Call me back immediately. I was staying at a hotel under a fake name, thinking I was being paranoid. Turns out, I wasn't being paranoid enough. At 2 p.m. sharp, just as I'd predicted, the coroner released his preliminary findings. Richard Pemberton had been poisoned with digitalis over a period of several months, with a fatal dose administered within 24 hours of his death. The press went wild. Wealthy businessman murdered by mystery killer. Pemberton family under investigation. Secret daughter claims inheritance from poisoned father. By 4 p.m., Eleanor was in police custody for questioning. By 6 p.m., Chad and Lisa were also being questioned about the embezzlement charges. I thought I was safe. I thought it was over. I was wrong. That evening, as I was walking back to my hotel, I noticed the same black SUV had been following me for 6 blocks. My heart started racing, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Then I saw the second SUV. I ducked into a crowded restaurant, pulling out my phone to call Maya, when I felt someone sit down behind me. Don't turn around. Don't make a scene. Just listen. The voice was male, professional, calm. The kind of calm that comes from doing terrible things for money. Mrs. Pemberton hired us to deliver a message. You have 24 hours to recant everything you've said about the family. You will publicly admit that you made everything up to claim an inheritance you don't deserve. You will disappear from California and never contact the Pemberton family again. And if I refuse? I whispered. Then you'll have a very unfortunate accident. Car crash, probably. So tragic. So young. The man stood up and walked away, leaving me shaking at the table. Eleanor was willing to have me killed rather than face justice for her crimes. I called Maya immediately. They threatened to kill me. I'm calling the police right now. Maya, Eleanor is already in custody. The police think she's safely locked up. These guys she hired, they're not going to stop just because she's arrested. There was silence on the other end of the line. Tasha, what are you going to do? I looked around the restaurant, at all the normal people living their normal lives, and I made a decision that would change everything. I'm going to end this. Tonight. Tasha, no. Don't do anything stupid. Maya, trust me. I have a plan. But I didn't have a plan. I had desperation, anger, and a death wish. I left the restaurant through the kitchen exit and made my way to the Pemberton mansion. If Eleanor's hired killers wanted to find me, I'd make it easy for them. The house was dark, Chad and Lisa were probably still at the police station, and the staff had been sent home. Perfect. I used Richard's key one last time and let myself into the study where this whole nightmare had started. Then I waited. They came at midnight. 3 men, professional, quiet. They probably thought they were walking into an easy job, kill the girl, make it look like an accident, collect their money. They had no idea they were walking into a trap. See, what they didn't know was that I'd spent the afternoon wiring the entire study with cameras and microphones, all connected to a live stream that Maya was recording from her office. Every word they said, every move they made, was being documented. When they found me sitting calmly at Richard's desk, they were confused. You're supposed to be running, the leader said. I was never very good at running, I replied. But I'm excellent at finishing things. I gestured to the cameras I'd placed around the room. Smile, gentlemen. You're live on the internet. Their confusion turned to anger, then to panic. You think you're smart? The leader snarled, pulling out a gun. We'll just kill you and destroy the equipment. You could do that, I agreed. But then you'd have to explain to the police why you murdered someone on a live stream that's being watched by over 10,000 people right now. That was a lie. Maya was the only one watching. But they didn't know that. The 3 men looked at each other, uncertain for the first time. Eleanor Pemberton hired you to kill me, I continued. speaking directly to the cameras. She's already in jail for murdering my father, and now she's trying to have me eliminated to cover up her crimes. Shut up, the leader yelled, but I could see the fear in his eyes. What's your name? I asked him calmly. I mean, since you're about to murder me on camera, the least you could do is introduce yourself. That's when we heard the sirens. Maya had called the police the moment she saw the men enter the house. They'd been surrounding the property for 15 minutes, waiting for my signal. The three killers looked around in panic, realizing they'd been outplayed. Drop your weapons, came the voice through a megaphone outside. The leader looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over. Actually, I said, standing up from the desk with a smile, it is. The police stormed the house, arrested all three men, and secured the evidence that would put Eleanor away for life. But I wasn't done yet. Because while Eleanor was going to prison and her hired killers were going with her, Chad and Lisa were still out there. Still angry. Still dangerous. And I still had one more score to settle. 3 weeks later, I was standing in the same conference room where this whole story began, but everything had changed. Eleanor Pemberton was in prison, charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and a dozen other crimes. She would never see the outside of a cell again. Her three hired killers had turned on her completely, testifying in exchange for reduced sentences. They'd given the police details about other jobs Eleanor had commissioned over the years. Apparently, I wasn't her first target. Chad was facing federal embezzlement charges and would likely serve 5 to 7 years in prison. His gambling debts had destroyed his credit, his reputation, and his engagement to the socialite girlfriend who dumped him the moment his arrest made the papers. Lisa had been charged with charity fraud and tax evasion. Her husband had filed for divorce and custody of their children. The country club had revoked her membership. Her perfect suburban life was in ruins. And me? I was sitting at the head of that same mahogany conference table, but this time, I wasn't the outsider looking in. I was the owner of 40% of Pemberton Industries, worth $12 million, and the daughter Richard Pemberton had finally, publicly claimed. The company's board of directors was announcing me as the new chief operations officer. At 28 years old, I was one of the youngest executives of a Fortune 500 company. But the money, the power, the corporate title, none of that was the real victory. The real victory was the letter I'd received from Richard's lawyer that morning. A final letter from my father, to be delivered only after Eleanor's conviction. My dearest Tasha, it read, if you're reading this, then you've survived Eleanor's final attempts to destroy you. I knew she would try to eliminate you rather than accept you as part of the family. I'm sorry I put you in danger, but I had faith that your strength would see you through. You are everything I wished I could have been. Brave, principled, and willing to fight for what's right. Use your inheritance to build the world you want to see. Make the Pemberton name mean something good for the first time in generations. I love you, and I'm proud to call you my daughter. Dad, for the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged somewhere. But I didn't want to belong to their world. I wanted to change it. 6 months later, I stood in front of a brand new community center in Oakland, cutting the ribbon on the Richard Pemberton Foundation for Social Justice. We were funding affordable housing projects, educational scholarships for underprivileged kids, and legal aid for families fighting discrimination. The foundation's mission statement was simple: to ensure that every child, regardless of race, economic status, or family circumstances, has the opportunity to claim their rightful place in the world. Maya stood beside me as I spoke to the crowd of community members, activists, and local politicians who had gathered for the opening ceremony. My father, Richard Pemberton, was a complicated man, I said into the microphone, my voice carrying across the crowd. He made mistakes. He was a coward when he should have been brave. But in the end, he tried to do the right thing. This foundation is his legacy and mine. In the audience, I saw faces that had supported me through the darkest period of my life. Detective Rodriguez, who had helped me understand that protecting myself wasn't a crime. Mr. Caldwell, the lawyer who had delivered the news that changed my life. The community organizers I'd worked with who had never stopped believing in me. But the most important face in that crowd was sitting in the front row, beaming with pride. Marcus Williams. Yes, the same Marcus I'd been too distracted to properly date during the inheritance battle. We'd reconnected after the dust settled, and he'd stood by me through the media circus, the legal proceedings, and the long nights when I'd wondered if I was strong enough to handle everything that came with my new life. 6 months after the foundation opened, Marcus proposed to me in Richard's old study. The same room where I'd discovered the truth about my father's love and where I'd faced down hired killers. We'd transformed it into the Foundation's headquarters, turning a place of secrets and pain into a space dedicated to justice and hope. "You've claimed your legacy," he said as he got down on one knee. "Now let me help you build our future." We were married a year later in a ceremony that would have given Eleanor Pemberton nightmares. It was held in the community center, officiated by the pastor from my childhood church, with a guest list that included everyone from former gang members I'd helped get jobs to Silicon Valley executives who now served on the Foundation's board. But the most meaningful moment came when Detective Rodriguez, who had become like a mother to me, walked me down the aisle. In the absence of the father who couldn't claim me in life, I was surrounded by the family I'd chosen and who had chosen me. As I stood at that altar, looking out at all the faces of people who had supported my journey, I thought about how different my life could have been. If Richard had been braver. If Eleanor had been kinder. If Chad and Lisa had seen me as a sister instead of a threat. But then I realized something profound. I didn't want their version of my story. The version where I was accepted into their world of privilege and prejudice, where I became another wealthy socialite more concerned with charity galas than actual change. The battle for my inheritance had revealed who I really was. Not just Richard Pemberton's secret daughter, but Tasha Williams, a woman who could face down killers and corporate boardrooms with equal courage. A woman who could turn pain into purpose and betrayal into justice. 3 years later, I was testifying before Congress about corporate accountability and family wealth transparency laws. The Pemberton Act, as the media called it, would require companies to disclose any family members who receive financial support, preventing future cover-ups like the one that had hidden my existence for 28 years. Chad was serving his sentence in a minimum security federal prison, where he was supposedly writing a memoir about his fall from grace. I'd been told by mutual acquaintances that he'd found religion and was attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings. Whether his transformation was genuine or just another con, I didn't know, and honestly, I didn't care. Lisa had served 18 months and was now working as a receptionist at a nonprofit in Phoenix, using a different name and trying to rebuild her life away from the scandal. Her ex-husband had remarried, and her children barely remembered her. Sometimes I felt sorry for her, but then I remembered how eagerly she'd participated in the plan to destroy me. Eleanor died in prison 2 years into her sentence. Heart attack, the report said. Natural causes. No foul play suspected. She was 71 years old, and according to her cellmate, she spent her final months insisting that she was the victim of a vast conspiracy orchestrated by that black girl who stole my life. I didn't attend her funeral. Neither did Chad or Lisa. She was buried in a small cemetery outside the city, with only the prison chaplain and a few lawyers present. The woman who had killed for wealth and status died alone and forgotten. When Maya called to tell me about Eleanor's death, I expected to feel relief or satisfaction or some sense of closure. Instead, I felt empty. Not sad, exactly, but not triumphant either. Just empty. She wasted her whole life on hate. I told Marcus that night as we sat on the porch of the house we'd bought in the Oakland Hills. All that money, all that privilege, all those opportunities to make a difference in the world, and she chose hate instead. That's her tragedy, Marcus replied, taking my hand. But it's not yours. Look what you built from the same circumstances. He was right. By then, the Richard Pemberton Foundation had awarded over $50 million in scholarships, built 12 community centers, and funded legal challenges that had changed discriminatory practices at dozens of corporations. I'd kept my promise to Richard. I'd made the Pemberton name mean something good. But more than that, I'd made the name Tasha Williams mean something too. 5 years after that first will reading, I was invited to speak at UC Berkeley's graduation ceremony. As I stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of young faces about to start their adult lives, I thought about the 19-year-old girl I'd been, scared, ashamed, carrying secrets that she thought would destroy her if anyone found out. The most powerful thing anyone ever told me, I said to those graduates, was that I had the right to claim my place in this world. Not because of who my father was, or how much money I inherited, or what family I was born into. I had the right to claim my place because I existed, because I had value, because I had something to contribute. Some of you will inherit wealth. Some of you will inherit poverty. Some of you will inherit families who support you, and some of you will inherit families who try to destroy you. But all of you, every single one of you, are inheriting the same thing that matters most, the power to choose who you become. The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes. After the ceremony, a young Black woman approached me, tears in her eyes. "Ms. Williams," she said, "I'm graduating with a degree in social work, but my family thinks I'm crazy for not going into business or law. They say I'll never make any money helping people." I smiled, remembering my own doubts at her age. "Money isn't the only kind of wealth," I told her. "And sometimes the most valuable inheritance you can leave behind isn't what you accumulated, but what you built." That night, Marcus and I sat in our home office, reviewing applications for the Foundation's newest initiative, a program to help children of undocumented immigrants access higher education. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Richard had been brave enough to claim you when you were young?" Marcus asked. I considered the question seriously. I think I would have been a different person. Probably softer. Definitely less prepared for the fight that was coming. Do you wish things had been different? I looked around our office at the walls covered with photos from community center openings, scholarship ceremonies, and legal victories. Pictures of young people who'd gotten their first jobs through our programs, families who'd moved into affordable housing we'd funded, communities that had been transformed by the resources we'd provided. "No," I said finally. "I don't wish things had been different. Because if they had been different, I might never have learned how strong I actually am. I might never have learned that I don't need anyone's permission to claim my legacy. My legacy isn't the money Richard left me, or the company shares, or even the foundation. My legacy is the proof that a Black woman from Oakland can take on an entire system designed to exclude her and not just survive, but thrive. My legacy is every young person who sees my story and realizes that they don't have to accept the limitations other people try to place on them. My legacy is the knowledge that sometimes the family that tries to destroy you is just clearing the path for you to build something better. And that, my friends, is how I claimed my legacy. Not just the inheritance Richard left me, but the inheritance I'm leaving for the next generation. The absolute certainty that you have the right to exist, to succeed, to take up space, and to fight for what's yours. So here we are at the end of this incredible journey. From a community organizer living paycheck to paycheck, to a multi-millionaire philanthropist who faced down murderers and won. It seems impossible, doesn't it? Like something that only happens in movies. But it happened to me. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to you. Whatever legacy you're trying to claim. Whether it's financial, professional, personal, or spiritual, remember this. The people who try to stop you are usually afraid of what you might become. They're not trying to protect themselves from who you are now. They're trying to protect themselves from who you could be. Eleanor, Chad, and Lisa weren't just afraid of losing money. They were afraid of what it would mean for a Black woman to have equal power in their world. They were afraid of what would happen when someone who actually cared about justice got access to their resources. They were right to be afraid. If this story has inspired you, if it's given you the courage to fight for what's rightfully yours, if it's reminded you that you're stronger than you think you are, then please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell me about the legacy you're claiming. Because here's the truth, your story isn't over yet. Your legacy is still being written. And somewhere out there, someone needs to hear about your victory the same way you needed to hear about mine. The fight for what's rightfully yours might be difficult. It might be dangerous. It might require you to be braver than you've ever been before. But you know what? You're worth fighting for. Your legacy is worth claiming. And the world is waiting to see what you'll build once you stop asking for permission and start taking what's yours. This is Tasha Williams, reminding you that your legacy isn't what happens to you. It's what you do with what happens to you. Until next time, keep fighting, keep building, and keep claiming what's yours.